A Giants podcast for Giants fans
by Giants fans.
It's Shaun Morash.
On the sideline, into the end zone. Touchdown, Giants!
From the offseason to the wins and the losses, it's time to take one Giant step.
All right, welcome into One Giant Step. I'm Shaun Morash. He's Bryce Gelman. We are, at time of recording, 17 days away from draft day, Brycey? 17 days away? You can, of course, download, subscribe, One Giant Step everywhere podcasts are available as we continue your draft build up. The anticipation is growing, kind of like a little bit of a stalemate right now because there's been no movement. We're still just guessing on which quarterbacks go where. But with that, Monday, April 9th is the time of recording this and taping this. So again, thanks for listening whenever you are. And there is giant news, Bryce. We didn't know exactly which way we were going to go. We have some draft thoughts. But the untold story of Darren Waller. And I think this is important to bring up here for Giant fans listening and subscribing. Look, I do sports radio in New York Monday through Friday, where we are in the midst of, the Knicks chasing down a 2 seed. Rangers Islanders play tonight. By the way, this is a Tuesday, not a Monday, and I'm an idiot. Yankees off to a hot start. The Mets have had a good weekend. So until the draft gets really heated up, some of this football news could fall between the cracks. And I kind of feel like the Darren Waller retirement, will he retire, won't he retire stuff, has kind of just been pushed to the back burner. A, maybe because not a lot of people care to begin with. But B, how prevalent did it have to be? And I got to be honest, today we get the report. Vic Tapper, who works for The Athletic, has covered the Raiders for a long time. Obviously, Darren Waller probably has a history out there with him. Darren Waller has told him that he is still undecided on if he wants to play or retire from the NFL. Waller knows the Giants would probably want a decision before the draft, but he also doesn't want to put a hard deadline on himself. All right, Bryce, we got to dig deep into Darren Waller here. The time is now. I'm pissed off. I'm annoyed. I'm annoyed at every part of this. And let's just, for starters, say this. The Giants at this point should not be making any draft determinations based on whether Darren Waller will be a New York Giant in 2024 or not. Much like I crushed the Jets fans who seem to think Aaron Rodgers is going to play 4 more years because Aaron Rodgers just a year ago told us he was 90% retired. I have to be fair and do the same here with the Giants and Giant fans. Clearly apples and oranges comparing a tight end to a quarterback. But if Darren Waller is this close to contemplating retirement now, and you have any dreams of taking a tight end, whatever round that you think best fits, take the guy. Because even if this is a year where Darren Waller plays, how do you have any confidence he plays beyond this year? And oh, by the way, throw in his injury history. So let's just start right there, Bryce. Yeah, the Giants would like an answer before the draft, and they should get one before the draft. But whether they do or don't should not drastically alter their plans.
This bothers me because as of right now, the Giants, this could change everything for them. Like I obviously, I say obviously, I hope the Giants have known more than the fans, than the media about Waller. Hopefully he's been in conversation with Joe Schoen and Brian Dable about his thoughts, his thought process regarding him going into his age 32 season, having really not played a full season in 3 full seasons now. So I can understand where his thought process is at. I could see that going into a season with a team that ceiling is probably, 8 wins, let's say, I could see him not wanting to play for that team, but then to be like, well, now I'm thinking about retiring, especially with this timing. With the draft, as you said, 16, 17 days away, there was one guy in that first round that could go in the top 10 who could very well end up with the Giants, especially now that Darren Waller, there's no guarantee. Yeah, Brock Bowers, there's no guarantee that Darren Waller is back. This could change everything for the Giants. But on the other hand, on a personal level, I can understand where he's coming from, but stop dilly-dallying. Like, make your decision, get out of the Giants' way if you really want to retire. If you want to go home, chill with Kelsey Plum, I understand it. All right, go ahead. Be my guest. Good for you, man. Good for you, Darren Waller. If you don't, I may not want to play football too if I was dating Kelsey Plum. But you got to make your decision, and you got to make it fast. You have 2 weeks now, realistically, to make this huge, life-changing, life-altering decision that you've already probably been mulling over for 3 months now. So get it out of the way.
let's put Brock Bowers to the side. I think that's a good draft nugget to bring up in a couple minutes, but let's just keep tackling the Darren Waller part of this. There were Darren Waller retirement rumors and stories before free agency started, and there was some thought, hey, he's got to let the Giants know before free agency. In fact, the Giants operated in free agency, to me, as a team that doesn't expect to have Darren Waller for 18 weeks, which is probably the way they should have operated anyway. They signed Chris Manhertz and Jack Stoll. Now, you might be saying, well, who are those guys? Jack Stoll was the second tight end on the Eagles. Caught up passes. Both of those guys blocking tight ends, which was an enormous need. Daniel Bellinger showed true signs of being a number one tight end in his rookie year. He was asked to do a lot because that was a tight end room that, let's be honest, was very lacking. And he was a third, fourth round pick. I forget where Bellinger was taken there. Probably, I think, the fourth round. He had to step in to be the number one tight end. And he got hurt. Remember, there was a big eye injury he had versus Jacksonville. But he was a really important part of the 2022 team. And he took a step back, became mainly the blocking tight end / fullback. We saw way less passes go Daniel Bellinger's way. And not that he is Travis Kelce or anything. I'm totally comfortable with Daniel Bellinger being my number one tight end and going back to being more of a pass catcher. If they have, and they have, added a couple true blocking tight ends here with Stoll and Manhertz. So they are operating as if Bellinger can be their number one tight end, which I think is fine. You don't need a superstar tight end. You do need a big-time wide receiver if your tight end is not your number one receiver, which is a story for another draft day here with the Giants. But I think they operated free agency in total preparation. If Waller's on the team, they're going to carry those 4 tight ends. If he's not, they're going to carry 3, if not draft another one. So I'm not going as crazy about the draft deadlines, the free agency deadlines. To me, I think the damage is already done. I would have liked the cap relief ahead of free agency to know a thing or two here about what they were doing. The draft, to me, at that point becomes semi-insignificant. If you love Brock Bowers, then take Brock Bowers. Don't not take him because Darren Waller's on the team. But, this comes into a true conversation about what an athlete owes a team, dare I say, an athlete owes a fan base as opposed to what they owe themselves. And make no mistake about it, if you have thoughts about retirement, you're unsure, you should be entitled as a human being to that great life decision. And in fact, we've seen it with Tom Brady, we've seen it with Brett Favre. You get crushed publicly if you retire and then come back and then do it again. So if you're unsure, you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. You're either getting killed like Darren Waller is here, or you get killed by coming back and playing and then retiring again. So I do see that. Here's the issue, though. This is a salary cap sport. And you do get some salary cap relief by retirement, okay? This is a sport where it's not tennis, it's not golf where you're only affecting yourself. You are still affecting a team, a makeup. Maybe Joe Schoen views Darren Waller as the team's number one wide receiver and maybe feels less pressure if he knows he's out there to have to go wide receiver in round 1. Maybe he does take a gamble on a quarterback. I'm not saying you should alter your plans, but these are all things affected. And I just think an athlete's retirement is way different on a team sport, is way different than a plumber retiring from the union. And you kind of got to make a decision. Like, as uncomfortable as it is, make the move, man. Or just come out and say, hey, I'm not really into training camp like Strahan did in 07, then go play your one last year or something like that. I work with Tiki Barber every day, Evan and Tiki, 2 to 6, free on the Audacy app. When he was stepping away and retiring, when that got out in 2006, there's some thought, he's quitting on the team. No, he was not quitting on the team. In fact, I would have rather he did what he did, and the Giants planned in 07, right? They were able to take Ahmad Bradshaw in the 7th round. They already had Brandon Jacobs on the roster. So dragging this out into April and May, if you ultimately do retire, I'm sorry, it's selfish.
He's holding the organization hostage right now. I mean, let's put it bluntly. Like, there isn't much they can do right now without knowing whether or not their star tight end is going to be returning to the team. He's still technically in his prime. I mean, you could say that the injuries have slowed him down a touch and him not playing 17.
What? When he was healthy last year,
tight end.
He's still a damn good tight end.
Yeah, he's still a top. He's still objectively a top 10 tight end in the league. He's the guy the Giants traded for. He could potentially be their number one weapon. I mean, if he stays healthy. So, and I understand, what happened last year. The expectations that the Giants didn't meet, the fact that he had 3 different quarterbacks throwing to him throughout the year. I think he wants more stability, but I also think that he wants some stability with his life. But again, you're holding the organization hostage. Make your decision. Get out of the way if you want to get out of the way, but you got to do it now. I think there can't be any more dilly-dally. We can go back and forth on this all day long, but the reality of the situation is the longer he waits, the more of a bind he puts the Giants front office in. And if I'm Joe Schoen and Brian Dable, I'm pissed. I'm very annoyed right now at Darren Waller. And from a human-to-human basis, like I'm like, okay, I get it. Make your decision, whatever you want with your life. You're entitled to do that. But you can't screw up your organization by not making set decisions. You mentioned Tom Brady. Both times, yes, I understand the one time he retired, then came back. He retired February 1st. He gave the organization ample amount of time to make whatever decisions necessary for them to acquire a quarterback, to get off the salary. Like the Giants, with the money that they could potentially have, with Darren Waller off the books, would be massive. Let's just look at that objectively. The Giants could make some major moves if they had the money from Darren Waller retiring. And I don't know. I think it's May. What is it, like the June 1st cutoff? Like if he doesn't retire before, I don't know the rules, the salary cap rules. Yeah. So the longer he holds off, the more screwed the Giants become because they're playing the waiting game and they're guessing. They're like, okay, well, we think he might, but what if he doesn't? What if we spend that first round pick on Brock Bowers instead of taking one of those top receivers? And then guess what happens? One of those top receivers turns out to be one of the greatest receivers ever. And let's say Darren. I mean, I know I'm completely speculating, and these are all hypotheticals.
Yeah.
But if that happens,
that's a trickle down.
He will face a lot of backlash.
Of course, and that's why I think the Giants just, no matter what their plan is, Bryce, they need to make the plan that Darren Waller's not here. I think that's it, point blank. And if Darren Waller decides to play, well, then you pivot. Okay, and then if you have a couple dynamic tight ends, that's fine. If that's the route you're going. Plan as if your roster doesn't have Darren Waller, because, by the way, his injury history tells you you're not going to have him for multiple weeks this year anyway. But just, it still comes across as selfish. You'd like to know yes or no. Yeah. Now, NFL draft needs. Brock Bowers is an interesting one. And that's why I think we should talk about here before we get into the needs after round one. That's fine. That was a pre-planned thing. This is It's all right, Bryce. This is live podcasting here. It's fine. Brock Bowers, tight end out of Georgia. Look, you're going to hear this said a lot about a lot of prospects right now. Could be the best prospect in the entire draft. Could be. Seen enough at Georgia. He can block. He runs like a gazelle. And look, when you watch Patrick Mahomes chuck it to Travis Kelce, when you watch Brock Purdy chuck it to George Kittle, clearly having one of these dynamic tight ends is something a team should salivate over. Again, what makes George Kittle and Travis Kelce even more attractive on top of being awesome is that you didn't use first-round picks on them. I have learned my lesson, so to speak. I'm not as hard and fast on this as I am with running backs and trying to avoid to take them in the first round. I was Google Gaga. Jeremy Shockey's one of my favorite Giants of all time. When the Giants took him in the first round way back when at a different NFL, Shockey was such a different, unique type of tight end at the time that where the Giants were picking made a lot of sense. Look, if the Giants were picking last year, or picking like they were last year where they took Deontay Banks, 21, 22, 23, wherever that was, okay? And Brock Bowers was sitting there and they were in the need for a dynamic tight end, I could live with it. When you stink as bad as the Giants did, and you're picking sixth, and if it wasn't for a third-string quarterback winning a couple games, you could have had a top 2 or 3 pick. I personally, Bryce, have a hard time walking away from this draft with tight end, as dynamic as Brock Bowers might be, being the selection, especially when you probably figure 3 quarterbacks, 3 wide receivers, some combination, if you eliminate J.J. McCarthy, of one of those 6 players will be on the board for the New York Giants. To pass on one of those guys to take Brock Bowers, I think just wouldn't sit well with me. I remember sitting in Radio City Music Hall the night the Giants drafted Odell Beckham Jr. and wanting badly for them to take Eric Ebron. How wrong was I? They could have also had Aaron Donald. I remember badly wanting O.J. Howard in the first round. The Giants ended up going tight end. They take Evan Ingram, who, drops a ton of passes, wasn't, as dynamic as he's been fine with Jacksonville. I think people have overrated his move to Jacksonville. I see with the Falcons, and I know it's a lot of that was on Arthur Smith, their failure to use Kyle Pitts the way they've used him. I've heard this song and dance about big tight ends and potentially being best players in the draft before. I'm telling you, Ebron was one of those guys. O.J. Howard was one of those guys. And I mentioned Kyle Pitts was one of those guys. He could become the best tight end of all time. And I'm sure he would be a useful player for the Giants. Where they are at 6 to me does not match using a pick on Brock Bowers with or without the decision from Darren Waller.
Yeah, Shaun. I think that above all else, you draft from a mix of value and what you really need. When you look at the Giants roster, we talked about it just a few minutes ago, and I have to echo the sentiment that you offered here. I'm fine with Daniel Bellinger being the number one tight end on this team. I don't think that drafting Brock Bowers is going to make or break what the Giants offense is able to accomplish this next year. I think drafting a number one receiver can, 100%. It could open up the Giants offense for the two young wide receivers they have.
Bryce, I'll let you finish. Think of it simply to the audience. In your mind, when the Giants take the field, and let's just play the game, it's Daniel Jones or it's Michael Penix or Bo Nix, they use a second-round pick or whatever. What is a better Giant offense? One that has a number one tight end of Daniel Bellinger, but the number one wide receiver is Malik Neighbors or Roma Dunze or Marvin Harrison Jr., also to go with Wandale and Hyatt. Or is it Brock Bowers is your number one tight end? Maybe you have Darren Waller, and then Bellinger sleds on the depth chart, but you have, Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt as your number one wide receiver. I'd rather use the sixth pick on the wide receiver then.
I'm taking option A all day long, and I don't think that you'll find many Giants fans who disagree with that. I think after everything that we've seen from this draft season, all of the mock drafts, all of the reports, the J.J. McCarthy talk, I think most Giants fans are set on the belief that a number one wide receiver, Malik Neighbors, maybe Marvin Harrison Jr., somehow falls to them, or Roma Dunze, that is what will set this Giants team up for success in the future. Because if you look at this offense on paper, it's objectively terrible. It is. It's one of the worst offenses in all of football, I think. I think you could say that. And there's been a lot made about that since Saquon left to go to the Eagles, kind of comparing both offenses. Look who the Giants have now. We get it. We understand. But you acquire that number one receiver. You get that out of the way. It's just adding to the foundation of this team. The stuff that we discussed about a month ago. It's acquiring the guys that could set your team up for success in the future. Get that number one wide receiver. His ceiling, he's not going to reach for another 3 to 4 years. You have 3 to 4 years to build around that guy. So I think that everything aside, especially where you drafted before, the fact that you've used these assets to acquire other receivers who have shown promise, they need that number one receiver. The Giants need a number one receiver. I don't want to hear it with the Brock Bowers talk. Darren Waller aside, it's not going to happen. It can't happen. The Giants need to stick to their guns, continue to add to the foundation of this team. They need to draft one of those top receivers, Shaun.
Okay, Bryce, we have a couple minutes left to play with here. I want to do the next 3 weeks of podcasts, or this one and then the next two leading into the draft, kind of wrapping up with the same question until we inevitably get the answer, which is, the Giants currently sit at 6th overall. When that Thursday night of the draft rolls around, will the Giants be picking at 6th overall?
I think so. I do. I think so. I think there's an argument to be made for trading down and building the secondary and passing up one of these potential generational wide receivers, or there's some situation where no one trades up for J.J. McCarthy, then you end up with the third of the three receivers, which I'd rather have my choice at 2 or 3. That would be a situation where I potentially want to move down. I cannot foresee a circumstance where the Giants trade up. I really hope it doesn't happen at this point. I've sat on this for a while. I've spent many nights thinking about what the Giants could do in that situation. I don't want it to happen. This is a little biased. I think that there's some part of me that is speaking emotionally, but I hope it doesn't happen. But I also don't think it does. Especially speaking of what we spoke about last week, the smoke screen of J.J. McCarthy, all that hype. I just don't see the draft playing out in a way where the Giants willingly give up a potential first-round pick, a potential second-round pick in the future. They give up their second-round pick, third-round pick this year, and a first next year for one of those top 3 quarterbacks, unless the front office is completely enamored with one of those guys. And from everything that we've heard, I don't see that there is that guy out there right now, Shaun.
They might be, though, man. They might be.
You never know.
Albert Breer had a good piece where Joe Shane talked about how, the Buffalo News came out the next day saying they'd picked the wrong Josh and how you just have to go with their instinct. I'll put it this way. I trust the fact that the front office, we don't have many leaks, and it's almost scaring me where Gelman would reveal all those cards in his worst shape.
Yeah.
I got no freaking, I'm 2 weeks ahead of it. I got no freaking idea what they're going to do. So I ask you that question because I'm with you. My gut tells me they stick to their guns at 6 and the pick is wide receiver, and maybe the second round becomes, a quarterback. And I'm starting to get a little scared that maybe that quarterback's Bo Nix. But again, I'm happy to be worse. And now Bryce, I'll end it with that.
I can't do it.
Before the Darren Waller news broke, full disclosure, audience, we were going to do some stuff on the Giants' needs beyond round 1 because, of course, the Giants have plenty of needs. Going forward next week on podcast day, which I think should be a Wednesday next week. I think should be a Wednesday. Yankees are in Toronto. Makes it a little easier for me to tape. Little day game. I think we should go over a mock draft and kind of look at what the Giants are going to address because, again, building this team is not just about adding top in talent in the first round. The Giants have some work to do in the rest of the draft, and we will tackle that next week as well. You can follow Bryce Gelman at Bryce Gelman. There's only one L in there, too, so don't get fooled. You can follow me on Twitter at Shaun Morash, Instagram at Morash Radio, and follow One Giant Step free on the Audacy app, everywhere you get your podcasts, and, of course, on the WFAN YouTube page as well. He's Bryce Gelman. I'm Shaun Morash, and thank you for taking one giant step with us.